I think if we had a time machine and we were able to hop inside and go all the way back to the year 2020, before the pandemic and everything got crazy, I think that most of us would be shocked at the prices of film and camera and all those things that we love. However, anybody that's tried to buy groceries or a car or tried to buy a house recently knows that the prices on things have just went through the roof. Prices are insane. Today on Overexposed, we're gonna take a look at just how much film prices have increased since 2020, how much of that we can attribute to inflation, and how much of that might be corporate shenanigans. So let's take a look. So if we'll rewind and think back to when this channel was mostly hacking and digital cameras and those kinds of things, one of the very first videos I made on Overexposed, when I kind of rebranded the channel, changed it from being more of a hacking general photography channel to a film specific channel, one of the very first videos that I made that got traction was a video about Kodak raising their prices. And this was back in 2022. Basically what happened there was on March 1st of 2022, the dealer cost of Kodak films increased. And this applied to both 35mm, 120 and large format. But across the board, you saw something like a 15% to 30, 35% increase in film prices. So that meant that these dealers, when they would buy film in bulk from Kodak, they were paying a little more off the top. So 15% to 35%, the films were costing these dealers just a little bit more. Because these prices are unregulated, who knows then what the dealer or the retailer ended up doing with those prices? Because it was 15 to 35% from Kodak, but in terms of what the dealers were actually marking their prices up to, who knows? So that's why you end up seeing some inconsistency. Film and the selling of film, it's a pretty low profit margin business. Oftentimes these stores, these retailers are making cents on the roll, right? And if film is lost in the mail, an order goes missing, those types of things, the dealer ends up losing money. Can only conclude that it may be these dealers trying to make up costs that they're losing in other areas. So it's safe to say, at least on the Kodak side, there has been some price gouging. Something else that's happening in the background is many of these retailers that are selling film are also selling digital cameras, digital camera accessories as well. And I think that it's pretty safe to say at this point that with the advent of cell phones and those cameras getting better and better all the time, less folks are buying digital cameras as well. So retailers are looking to make money on the margins anywhere they can, trying to keep their doors open. So at least on the Kodak front, we can look back to that price increase in 2022, 10 to 35% from the dealer. Of course, on the ground, you and I, what we're paying for film, that's varied a little bit dealer to dealer, but we've noticed a little bit more significant price increases than that. So now turning our attention to Fujifilm, recently I made a video about Fujifilm as well. The most notable headline from that video was that Fujifilm was restarting their film production in Japan. For a while, they'd paused production. They'd stated a couple reasons, the most significant one being obviously the supply chain issues that have affected most industries. But what it amounted to was Fujifilm paused production of their films in Japan, but they made an announcement a few months ago that they would be restarting production. But along with that announcement that they're restarting production, they also announced some price increases. And what they stated was this. They stated that the company has been working hard to absorb the costs of film production by improving production efficiency and saving costs, but corporate efforts can only go so far. According to the chart that Fujifilm provided, film prices for retailers in the Japanese market will increase between 20 and 60%, while photographic paper and chemicals will increase by 10 to 20%, about 10% respectively. So an even more significant increase on the part of Fuji as well. I guess that a bunch of the corporate folks put their heads together and figured out, hey, if we're gonna still be in the film game, we're gonna have to at least make an attempt to make this a profitable endeavor. So 20% to 60%, that's honestly an insane amount. So 20% to 60%, that's honestly an insane price increase, especially at the high end. In the video, I pointed out that I did take comfort in the fact that Fujifilm was kind of recommitting to film and were at least attempting to turn it into a real business. For the longest time, many of us had thought that Fujifilm was maybe getting out of the film game. So at least at this point, maybe they're trying to continue to play ball. So getting back to the original point of this video, we've got price increases from Kodak, we've got really significant price increases from Fuji. What does this mean? Well, there's a really handy website out there just for this purpose, and it's Analog Cafe. And what the website prides itself on is its tracking of film prices over time. And they've got this really handy chart, and I'm gonna put this up on the screen so we can talk about it, but it tracks the prices of film from November 2018 to June of 2023. So it's been updated relatively recently. So basically what this chart does is on one line, you can see the higher line here, it tracks the prices of film. On the line underneath that, it's tracking inflation in the United States. So I think it's important first to point out which films are being tracked. It says on the top, they're tracking the average 35mm 36 exposure film price from November 2018 to June of 2023. The films that they're tracking, and I'm zooming in on it here, are Cinestill 800T, 50D, Fomapan Classic 100, Fuji Fujichrome Provia 100F, Velvia 50, Neopan Acros, and so on. And I'll flash that up on the screen. You can see the complete list of films that they're tracking, but it's all the major ones, right? It's basically the top 40 35mm films from B&H Photo. But the shops they're taking a look at to compare process are Analog Wonderland, Camera Film Photo, Film Photography Project, Adorama, B&H, Freestyle Photo, Blue Moon Camera, and Macro Direct. That's where they're getting their process from. So going and taking a look at these lines, you can see back in November of 2018, the average price of film was $8.50 per roll. So, I mean, honestly, wow. That's incredible. So I think if any of us could go out and get a roll of Ektar 100 or Portra 400 for $8.50 or anywhere close to that, really, I think we'd be stoked. But you can see as time has went on, it's increased all the way to $14.44. So the average price of a roll of 35mm film, 36 exposure, back in 2018 was $8.50, and now in June of 2023, that's $14.44. So over the course of 5 years, we have had almost a 100% increase in the price of film. So you look at the line underneath that, the one that tracks inflation. It's no mystery that we've had significant inflation in the United States. But even over the last 5 years, that insane inflation rate, right? That 5, 6, 7, 8% annualized inflation that we've been dealing with in the United States for the past few years pales in comparison to the price increases that film has experienced. Looks like the total inflation we've been dealing with over the past 5 years is like 20%. So again, with film, you're dealing with almost 100% price increase. So I think it's safe to say by looking at this graph and the wonderful info point out by Analog Cafe that film prices are way outstripping the inflation rate, right? Film prices are increasing at a much higher rate. So I guess the next question that we need to look at is why? Why is this happening? And I think that there are a number of reasons for this. And I think first and foremost, the amount of film manufacturers, just the factories out in the world that are making film are decreasing. So many of these companies, many of these factories out in the world that used to make film are no longer doing so. So you're buying film from only a few manufacturers. And shout out to Ilford for attempting to keep their prices low, but Kodak and Fujifilm, at least, they are raising the prices. These are really big businesses governed by CEOs trying to make money, which totally get, totally understand, but we are getting price increases as a result of that. Something else that's important is that the equipment required to produce film is no longer being manufactured either. So these folks who are left in the game, the ones that are trying to make film, are trying to keep their equipment, their existing equipment, cobbled together with chewing gum and duct tape, trying to keep their factories open. I think that very clearly also the direct production costs are increasing. The cost of inputs, you know, your chemicals, your paper, right? The actual materials required to manufacture film, the prices on those things are going up, and that's being reflected in the price of film as well. And also we would be remiss to not mention the cost of logistics. I think as gas prices increase and everything else in the world continues to increase in price, I think that quite simply now after the pandemic, it just costs a lot more to ship film than it used to did. And you're seeing that some in the pricing as well. So what are we gonna do about it? So I think that as consumers, it boils down to choice. I think that for many of us, we are still able and still willing to continue paying the prices, to continue to enjoy something that we've loved for years, and that's film. But I think that what this is gonna have an effect on is on the margins, obviously. Folks who may not have as much disposable income at the end of the month, folks who are trying to run businesses. I think that at the top of the bell curve, things are gonna be fine for folks shooting film. I don't think it's gonna affect most people. I think that we're just gonna pay the couple dollars more for each roll of film that we shoot and go on, but I think that it's gonna affect the margins. It's gonna affect people deciding to get into film. They're gonna look at those cheap 35mm plastic cameras. I think that they're gonna think twice about it when they see that Portra 400 is $20 or more per roll. So I think that's the end result of this. I think that it could potentially slow down the amount of folks who are gonna get in the hobby, and it's obviously gonna detract some on the margins, some folks who are more concerned with the cost of film. So, but what do you think? What is your pain tolerance for film? Are you gonna keep shooting film at its current prices? But if you thought this video was cool and you are worried about saving money with film, I made a video just for you. Take a look at this video about 5 ways that you could save money shooting film. But as always, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you could, before you go, subscribe. See ya.